Now then, folks, hope you're okay. Johnny Matthew here. Welcome back to the Trouble Kids blog. It's great to have you. If you are brand new, even better to have you. Thanks for discovering us. I hope you like it. If you've been here before and you're a free subscriber, you could always hop on and buy me a pint if you want by clicking one of the paid subscriber buttons. But as always, you can have this for nothing. So this is number 2 in a 3 blog post series about the Ammanford School stabbings down at Dyffryn Amman in Ammanford in Carmarthenshire in West Wales, not far from me. This actually, albeit the second post, was the first one that I wrote. I wrote this when the news broke and the girl was then later sentenced. So this is a mixture of my kind of peed offness that yet another childhood has been sacrificed on the altar of failed services, poor funding and government inertia. So some of that might come out as I read through it, but just to say that then what happened, I drafted this and I let it simmer because I aware it was quite an angry post. And then the review came out, and I wanted to get that out. So the post last week was about the review, and then I reread this and thought, I think what I'll do is post some of the questions that I had, and then we'll follow that up with a third post, which actually unpacks the recommendations of the review itself. So we get a little bit of completion. So this is the Ammanford School stabbings number 2, Musings after the fact. Introduction. On the 24th of April 2024 at about 11 a.m, a 13-year-old girl stabbed 2 teachers and a fellow pupil at Dyffryn Amman School in Ammanford in Carmarthenshire, West Wales. Mercifully, none of the injuries were life-altering, at least not physically, but one teacher who intervened suffered neck injuries which could easily have been life-threatening, if not fatal. Despite admitting the stabbings, there was a trial because the girl denied the intent to kill. First trial was, quotes, irretrievably compromised, unquote, and collapsed due to a great irregularity with the jury, the judge said. The girl was subsequently found guilty of all the charges and was sentenced to 15 years. Just let that settle in. This is a 13-year-old girl. She can expect to serve, as I understand it, 7.5 years in custody, obviously unless the law changes in the interim, and the rest will probably be served on licence in the community. Now, none of what follows here, I want to make this really clear, none of it intends to take away one iota from the shock or the suffering and fear that the folk involved went through, or indeed what they'll continue to go through as they deal with it and strive to recover from what were absolutely horrific events and try and get on with their lives. Really want to underline that at the beginning. But there are 1 or 2 observations I'd like to make. Most notably, the narrow, selective and spectacularly unhelpful emphasis the media always place on such tragedies. Firstly, though, raw facts. Here are a few things that seem clear. Now, they seem clear from the press reporting at the time. Remember, this was written before the review. So there are 7 things here. A child, weapons at school, government awareness or systems awareness, context on the day, near tragic outcomes, emotional impact and lost youth. So just a summary of the facts. Firstly, a child. As in the case of Axel Rudy Cabana, who was 17 when he killed 3 little girls in Southport in July last year, 2024. The girl who stabbed these 3 people in Ammanford was a child at the time. Just 13, in fact. I don't know how 13 she was. She could have been 13 the day before or about to turn 14. I don't know. Secondly, weapons at school. A Freedom of Information request to a school Dyffryn Amman, the comprehensive school where the offences took place. said that there were 4 incidents of weapons being taken into school premises during the 23-24 academic year. And bearing in mind that 23-24 academic year hadn't even finished at the point of these offences. It was in April. With 2 pupils being permanently excluded as a result. So it was a child. There were issues with weapons at the school. Thirdly, government awareness. A deputy head teacher from the school had written to the Welsh Government a number of times raising the issue of behaviour at the school, including the lack of clarity about powers to search pupils' bags. And the last of the emails was on the morning of the incident itself, and he resigned following the stabbings. Context on the day. One of the most frequently aired aspects of this case, aside from the phone footage of the incident itself, is a video from the school's CCTV system showing the girl sat alone in a school hall, stabbing the wooden floor next to her with a knife. Clearly something isn't right. Number 5, near tragic outcomes. 3 people got stabbed in public by someone they knew while at work at school. No one died, but it could so easily have been very different, and tragically so. Number 6, emotional impact. Lots of others witnessed what happened, were fearful then and doubtless still are now. Lots of parents waited in terror until the school came out of lockdown and they could be reunited with their children. The emotional impact will be long-lasting, especially, of course, for the girl herself and the 3 primary victims and their loved ones. And then lastly, lost youth. A child who was only 13 when this took place will be nearly 30 by the time the custodial and community supervision aspects of her sentence are done. So she was a child, history of weapons at school. The issue of weapons in school had been raised by a deputy head teacher. Context of on the day itself suggested something was desperately wrong and could be about to go very wrong. There were near tragic outcomes given the injuries and the potential for fatalities. The emotional impact is ongoing for those victims and their loved ones, but also the lost childhood, really, of the girl herself. So, what are we told about the girl? What do we know? Now, I'm a passionate believer in the need to keep such children's identities out of the public domain. The one downside of this, of course, is the almost complete lack of humanising information about them in the press and elsewhere. We hear lots about the offence, but next to nothing about the child behind it. Indeed, the child behind it is usually viewed, seen as, and labelled through the lens of what they did. And we get these ridiculously partially informed tropes of the press, and they become the kind of received truth about the child, and they linger long, unfortunately, in the public mind. But here are a few of the things that have appeared in the press about her. She made notes asking herself why she wanted to stab teachers. She received a fixed-term exclusion in September 2023, that's 7 months before the stabbings, for bringing a knife into school. On instruction from the local authority, the school waived their right to exclude her permanently. She had interests in war memorabilia, apparently, Hitler and weapons, but was not referred to the government's PREVENT system at the time. While still in primary school, so when she was 10 years old, concerns were raised when she took a BB gun into school. And then lastly, she's been described as odd. So we've got a child bringing weapons into school. The authorities were aware. The context of the day should have raised concerns. There were near tragic consequences with a huge emotional impact, and a kid has lost her childhood. And we know that she made notes about wanting to stab teachers. She had a history of bringing a weapon into school. She had an interest in war memorabilia, Hitler and weapons and so on, and had previously taken a BB gun into school, Other kids didn't like her and described her as odd. So we'll take a really quick break and then I'll come back and unpack some thoughts on that. All right, I've entitled this bit Cause and Cure. So if that last section is what we are told about the girl, principally from the press, remember this was before the review into the incidents. And by the way, in the text blog post of this, I've linked to the press reports and that I've used, so you can see the primary sources for that, if you like. Before I come on to this next section, I wanted to just cite this quote by Adolphe Quetelet, who I believe was a French astronomer, mathematician, statistician and sociologist. And the quote is this, quote, "Among all the causes which have an influence for developing or halting the propensity for crime, the most vigorous is, without contradiction, age." I like that. It's an acknowledgement that age is always a factor, and never more so in my view than when it's a child, because the process of human development is still in train and is nowhere near done. And particularly when it goes awry, as in this case, we need to ask clear, developmentally focused questions. All right, cause and cure, what we don't know. Now, reading everything I could on this case, I'm left with a pile of questions. And as I say, these were the things that I was musing on and wrote down before the review. That's why I've called it Musings after the fact. It's after the fact of the offences, but before we knew what was actually going on. And we've had this retrospective analysis in the review, which I'll cover next week. But as usual, media outlets focus on the impact on victims, bystanders, and the community at large. I mean, that's news, after all. But we're not given even a shred of information that demystifies what happened, gives insight into why, or at least what might have been going on behind it all. There is no vestige of explanatory value in any of it. And I think that's a big problem. On the contrary, what we are told is never balanced. It's almost entirely negative or shocking. And thus the public bay for justice without any relevant understanding of the cause. And without that, the route to any cure is obscured. Just as an aside, I'll try and remember to pin this to the show notes. I've read a brilliant paper years ago I think it was called Columbine and the Myth of the Teenage Super Predator. It came off the back of the school shootings at Columbine. But it was a brilliant analysis of how press coverage and the kind of mythologizing of these young people in the public mind is destructive. And the subtitle was something like, "We know what we think, don't confuse us with the facts." I think it was Mark Chaffin who wrote it. I'll try and remember to link to that in the post, but you can always email me if you want that paper. All right, so here's what I'd like to know. These were some questions that I was left with after reading the press coverage. What kind of girl was she? What did a good day look like for her? Did she have friends? Could she fit in, or was she isolated? Who liked her? What was she good at? Did she have aspirations or plans for the future? Why was she bullied? What did they say and do, and what did those around her do to support her? Why might her father have refused an early help assessment, given that he apparently asked for help? And I think it was she wasn't felt to meet threshold for the prevent intervention, so she was offered an early help assessment and he refused it, or he certainly refused a home visit, I believe. When were her unusual, quotes, interests first noticed? And by whom? And what was done about that? How were they typified in the family narrative? Did she ever speak about those to anybody else? And what aspects of her presentation, specifically, caused others to think that she was odd? So there's just a few initial questions. Perhaps more importantly, here's some others. Had she asked for help? And if so, what did she think would help her? Was any attempt made to get this for her? Who did she trust at school? Were there adults that she could speak to, and did she speak to anyone? Why did she dress like she did? Did this provide any insight into her internal world? Had this been raised with her? Were people concerned, or did it deflect people from her? What's her experience of home like? I wonder what she'd say, for example, if we played a game of word association and just gave her the word home or house or care or family, those sort of things. What do we know about why she took a knife to school on this and the previous occasion? Bearing in mind she'd done it first 3 years previously. And has she said why? And if she did say why, what sense did anybody else make or help her make of the answer to that question? And what was done as a result? Why was she not excluded and things escalated, given the repeated nature of the behaviour? Now, you guys will know I'm no fan of exclusion. But sometimes it's necessary. I'm not saying it is in this case. I don't know the details yet. But it will be interesting, for example, to see what the local authority said by way of their reasoning when they advised or instructed the school not to exclude her. And what was the narrative in school, both in the playground and the staff room, and I guess in the classrooms as well, about her as a person, as a pupil, as a learner, as a friend? Lots of questions. I wouldn't mind betting. Now, having spent the last 30 years dealing with youth crime in one form or another, youth justice, social work, sex offending specialism, running interventions in a secure unit and more, I'd be very surprised if there weren't a whole load of factors helping to fuel the kind of behaviour that exploded on the 24th of April 2024. It could be any or a number of a whole load of things: developmental issues, biological issues, neurodiversity, particularly this, I suspect, learning disabilities, abuse experiences, social isolation, episodic or serial trauma, and on it goes. You get the idea. I can count on one hand the occasions I've come across where a child has offended in this kind of way for no discernible reason. And bear in mind, I've dealt with dozens of kids in custody and out, probably hundreds. And that number drops again after a thorough assessment and getting them to know a little bit. So some of those, and you think, crumbs, I don't think there's a discernible reason that sits behind this, and that's really unusual. And then you get to know them and think, okay, now it makes sense as the facts emerge, or certainly the subjective truth of the child's own experience begins to emerge. And yet none of this that we've just talked about, none of it appears in the press. So the pervasive stereotypes of the lone, violent, antisocial teenagers continue to build in the public mind without challenge. Final thoughts. My heart absolutely goes out to those affected by this terrible incident. I can only imagine how scary and deeply unsettling this must have been for them. Only a fool would downplay the impact. But there's learning here for us all, surely. What I really want to know is what good the system thinks will come from putting a 13-year-old child through 2 trials on the basis that there was intent, rather than just accepting the guilty plea for the violence and putting in place the right structures to understand her, understand what happened, where it came from, and how to best help. It seemed to me we got distracted that there needs to be a murder charge rather than a manslaughter charge. And that meant there was a need for another trial. It probably meant it was a much, much, much more longer, drawn-out, turgid, tortuous process for everybody involved when the girl said, yeah, I absolutely was violent, but I really didn't mean to kill anybody. And yet I suspect, been distracted by our internal need for some kind of revenge or what we think of as justice as a system and as a society, such that we've forgotten the fact it's a 13-year-old girl with a track record who didn't get the help that she needed, and we've been utterly distracted into throwing the book at her and making a murder charge stick rather than accepting the plea and focusing all that energy, notwithstanding vast cost, on helping her to recover and, de facto, helping to avert further offences and therefore protecting the public. But unlike the current criminal sentence, this kind of approach, this kind of helping her understand what happened and trying to understand her, that would ensure that the lessons are learned, that she's treated as someone with needs that can be met, and the public will be a lot less likely to be affected by her behaviour in the future. And of course, by helping her, we'd have learned lessons that could have been generalised in other situations to help other kids and protect other people. One thing I'm sure about, though, is that if punishment doesn't work in changing behaviour like this, and we know it doesn't, doing so by denying a child her entire adolescence certainly won't work either. Help, not punishment. That's the way. So there you go. I know it's a bit morose, and it's me getting on my high horse. Believe me, that's a heavily edited. I was very peed off about this sentence and the insistence on pursuing a murder charge at the expense of giving her the help she needed for 12 months before it all happened. But anyway, there you go. I hope that's useful. Look out for the next one next week, where we'll go through the review itself, hopefully see some hope in that and suggest some things that might help in future. There are links both to all the sources and a number of other resources that I find helpful, particularly a book on children as risk, Anne-Marie McAllinden, the lectures by Dr. Gwen Adshead, Reith Lectures, and her brilliant book as well. I think it's called The Devil We Know. Absolutely superb. Anyway, those links are all in the blog, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Cheers, guys.